Good evening, everybody. Tonight we're meeting with Josh Harker, and Josh is an artist who I've been paying attention to for some time, and his career path, I think, has been kind of interesting. And Josh will correct me, but within the last couple of years, he did a Kickstarter project that became the most funded sculpture Kickstarter project ever, and now he's in the middle of doing another Kickstarter project. So, Josh, let me just ask you some general questions before we get to that.
Sure.
Where did you grow up?
Born and raised in Iowa for the most part, certainly the Midwest around Mississippi River, most of it in Iowa. Went to high school in a rural farm town outside the Quad Cities called North Scott in Eldridge, Iowa, and moved up to Chicago, I believe it was 91.
When did you know that you are an artist, or you were an artist? When did that come to you?
That was from the beginning. It's pretty much the only identity I've had. My mom and dad were both artists, and dating myself as far as when I grew up, the ages, it was kind of this hippie communal, lifestyle. A lot of people, living in communes, and a lot of artists, a lot of musicians, a lot of things like that going on. And I showed an affinity for that early. It was encouraged and was even singled out as a child prodigy in it, and got some special attention as a kid. So really, it's just something that's always been there that I've always done. I've never really considered anything else or thought of myself any different.
How did you become aware of Kickstarter in the first place?
The short version of it was I had started a boutique design and development company in '98, and sold my partnership in 2008, and to go back to full time as an artist, and was seeking the gallery route, all these traditional means, the exhibitions and the art fairs and anything to show my art, and was really spinning my wheels. And about that time, the economy really started tanking, and so it's really just an exploration. I started looking to all kinds of alternative resources to get my stuff out there, and certainly ultimately to sell it. And Kickstarter blipped on the radar. I saw a couple, project here and a project there. And after about 3 or 4 of these coming up, I started to look into what it was and how it was put together, and started to imagine what I could do with it. And that was about 1.5 years ago, I guess.
All right, so at the moment, right now, you have a Kickstarter project that you're doing. And so this is the second one. When was the first one?
The first one I launched last year in early September, and it ended, I believe, October 24th last year. It was like
so it's a little over a year between the two.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a 45-day project, and this one I just started in early November, and it's a 40-day project. It'll be done on the 23rd, I believe, of December.
All right, so do you have sort of prepared comments and you want to talk, or do you want me to keep asking you questions?
Either way, I could go on and lament about all the details. If you want to kind of lead it about, what you want to present, to your students, that's fine, or I can just start talking about.
Well, I don't see a whole lot of differences between your first project and your second project in terms of strategy or tactic or the starting price, etc. So I guess the question then is, how did you do such a good? Were you lucky the first time, or were you smart, or did you do a lot of research? How did you figure all that out?
Yeah, I made a little of all the above. Really, it was. I did tons of research. Really, really looked at it, and I studied all the projects that were happening at the time. And as much as the successful ones, I studied the ones that weren't successful. To really try to define what I didn't want to do. Of course, I knew, what I did and how I did it, and really tried to get my head around how I would present it within that format. It was kind of early. I think it was '09. They started Kickstarter, and it took a while to get any kind of traction. And when I did it, there wasn't, in this just last year, there wasn't a single $1 million project at all of any sort in any category. And now, you know, there's a $10 million project. There's dozens upon dozens of $1 million plus projects. So the point I'm getting at is when I did it, it was happening. Things were really starting to happen there, and but it was still very new and exciting, which I still think it is. But people picked up the project, so I thought it was cool. So I got this really great press exposure, and that was lucky. You know, it went crazy and it took on a life of its own. So this round, trying to build on what I did last time, and you know, make a better project, but also trying to, you know, vet the things that I did last time as well, and prove them out to myself, you know, about what really works and what doesn't. So I'm sticking with the things that, you know, that showed me last time that worked, and trying a couple new things. But you know, the format works, so I'm not trying to break what's not broken, or trying not to fix what's not broken.
All right. So what do we need to do to be 110% as good as you? How do we surpass you?
Well, it's I encourage everyone to, you know, to certainly try Kickstarter, and you know, if you're looking for a real place to experiment with marketing your work, or even trying just new stuff. You know, there's all kinds of categories, but to be realistic about it, there is a bit of a demographic to who uses Kickstarter. You know, and then the Kickstarter community, quote unquote, itself, that just kind of trolls for new projects, is even more within a certain demographic. But you can't, that being said, you can't rely on Kickstarter solely, just, you know, put it up and expect just being on Kickstarter that it's going to bring in, you know, fund your project, and everybody that's just on there is going to find you. It's very much a tool, just to, you know, a place to host what you're doing, and then you really need to, you know, define and use your own network to get people to find it and encourage them to support what you're doing. But again, there's a lot of opportunity there for experimenting and exploring new ways to get your work out there, and experiment with new ideas. Now, to do as 110%, you know, better than I did, you know, it's really just how, you know, a couple of things. I mean, how persistent and tenacious you are at really, you know, just, you know, pounding the pavement, so to speak, the internet pavement, and really getting the word out there, you know, without becoming a complete pest to everyone you know at the same time. You know, but the project needs to be well put together and ring true with everyone who sees it. It has to be something they want. I would suggest to everybody I've talked to that the rewards are a really big part of it, and Kickstarter has even gotten into a bit of a, I wouldn't say a corner, but they've tried to make it very apparent that they're not a store, that you don't just go there and buy, you know, whatever, you know, get a pre-release version of something, you pay, and then you just wait for it. I mean, there is risk. A lot of these projects on there, particularly the tech and the design projects, are very much, you know, they're businesses, and, you know, they may not ever go anywhere. And some people have, you know, put a lot of money into these things expecting these rewards to show up, and when they don't, they feel jilted. But, you know, so buyer beware. And the point with that is you need to really think about what you're going to put on there, and people do respond to the rewards in the sense that they're backing you because they want something for it. There's some philanthropy there, certainly, but you know, people do really respond to the tangible, you know, thing that they get for their support, and you know, that's proven time and time again, you know, to be a real driving factor on successful projects.
How did you figure out what kind of rewards to do?
Well, you know, there's a little bit of information on Kickstarter as far as, you know, what seems to go well. It seems the $25, you know, reward slot is very attractive. You know, they across the board, that reward tier seems to get the most activity. But at the same time, even with my project now, like I'm a little, and this is a good thing. My last project, I had almost 1,000 backers, and it made like $77,000. Now, like 3/4 of that was, maybe even a little more, with all these $50 reward, or these skulls I did. These guys here. This one's a little bigger, but I had a small version for $50, and that went crazy. That's where all of the support came from. So this time I wanted to make sure I had a, definitely a full spectrum of reward offerings, from $1, $10, and all the way up. I have a $5,000 reward tier. So the point is that anybody at any level, could offer support depending on how excited they were or how much money they were willing to spend on my pieces. And what I'm getting at is this time the highest percentage right now of funding I have is for $550 pieces. So I don't know what's going on there. So it's not always, I guess, the reward, the amount of the reward. Here's how attractive the reward is. So when you're asking, what should I make for a reward, I would definitely say you want to, it's a little bit of a shotgun approach. You don't want 50 things up there, but it's good to have, maybe 10 or 12 different rewards at all varying price levels to encourage people to participate. And what's good about the participation, not only that funding number, or, the pledges that come in, but you want the activity. You want people to be, not only backing up but sharing it, and to have those numbers increase. And Kickstarter's algorithms kind of watch that too. So if your project, quote unquote, is popular, if there's a lot of activity, both on Kickstarter and off of Kickstarter, they notice that. So you want a lot of activity, and you want people recognizing your work and getting a piece of it, no matter how much it goes for. I look at it really as it's really a big marketing campaign. When I did the project last year, that's all it was. It was an experiment. I had no idea what was going to happen. I put the goal at $500. I was going to do it no matter what and just see what happens. And the idea was to see if I could find some new collectors, see if I could get the piece out there and get people to just recognize something I did, and that happened. So even if it's, you don't have to think of it like I need to make $1 million on Kickstarter or it's all over. I mean, even $1,000 or a few $1,000s or whatever. If people are seeing your stuff and you have a new avenue to find new collectors and to have a discussion directly with an audience that likes your work, I mean that's invaluable. And I've got a huge amount of return collectors from the last project that are supporting me in this project and spending, hard-earned big dollars on what I consider, big money on my project. So I'm, Kickstarter is a great tool, but it's not all about.
Take a break here for a second, and
sure.
Let's explain how you make these.
Okay. It is.
You don't need to go into great detail, but I think people, I think it would help demystify.
Sure. Well, it's digitally sculpted, so I'm using software to these organic sculptural digital software packages to basically push meshes around and create these shapes. The stuff I happen to do really isn't makeable any other way. That's what led me to this. So after they're done, I print them on 3D printers, and that's a whole discussion in itself as far as the different technologies and different ways to use them and what each one offers. But so that's what I do. I sculpt them with computer software, and then I print them in different materials on 3D printers.
Okay, let's go back to Kickstarter now. How did you decide to put your target at $500 instead of $50,000 or somewhere in between?
Yeah, well, a lot of these projects on Kickstarter, people have a goal that they have to meet. Say you're going to make a book and publishing costs are this, and you can't do it if you don't have the money. With mine, the medium I'm working in is if I make one of them or I make 1,000 of them, each piece costs the same. And, so there is no economy of scale or a minimum order or anything like that, really. So, again, that first project I did, I was just going to, I wanted to make sure it was successful because I wanted to see it through and not have it, not have the experience of seeing what it's like to go through the entire process because I had my goal set too high. So I set it $500. I figured if I couldn't get that, then I needed to, definitely be looking somewhere else. But, that's what it was. It's just an experiment. So on this new project, I did the same thing. And kind of for the same reason, I'm committing to it regardless of what the funding is. My real initiative is for the exposure, the marketing aspect. finding new collectors, not the entire end amount.
Okay. Why has this been so successful for you when other things you've tried to do, gallery representation, whatever the other things you tried, didn't succeed as well?
Well, you know, I should likely be in your course because the gallery scene is mystifying to me. I don't get it, and you know, I tried to figure it out and do all the you know, follow all the protocol and you know, approach galleries and show my stuff and, you know, get into shows. And, you know, the stuff I was getting into things, but they were, you know, they're just costing me money. And I understand that's pretty regular to start out, that, you know, you're likely going to spend more money than you're going to make to get your stuff out there. But given where I'm at, you know, it wasn't an option for me to spend, you know, have this 20-year arc of trying to make a career out of this. I mean, I needed to get going now. I'm fairly impatient when it comes to that. So, you know, I look at it like winning the lottery. I mean, to get into a gallery and to be able to sell the quantity and the prices at the prices I need out of nowhere and to be discovered, in no way did it click in my head that that could happen. So
what's happening now as a result of these Kickstarter projects? You're getting included in exhibits and places and things like that?
Yeah, the galleries are coming. They're knocking on my door. Easily one or two a week are contacting me about shows of all different sorts. You know, some of them, you know, very attractive and prestigious, and some of them not so much. But you know, I'm not doing the legwork finding them. You know, places that think my stuff is going to fit are finding me.
How?
And just the exposure. I'm all over the place. I mean, and that's the thing. Outside of Kickstarter, you know, the internet as an exposure tool, you know, so people can find you, is huge. And again, you know, thinking about trying to make a career out of going, you know, that gallery route, you know, just the math of trying to think of how many people would go through a show and see my piece, and then have it, you know, when that show's over, it go into a basement for who knows how long. Until, you know, I find another place where there's another show. It just, that math seems to make no sense. So, you know, with the Kickstarter project, you know, 45 days, I get 1,000 collectors, and I've tried everything. I mean, I've got a website, and I've got a Facebook page with nearly 11,000 you know, followers, and I do the LinkedIn thing, and not so much Twitter. I'm on there, but I don't get it yet. But one thing that happened is the first project, there's a guy, Jared Tarvell. He is the co-founder of Etsy. He backed my project and wrote me a personal letter after getting his piece, and just, you know, it's just a lot of really kind words. And he suggested I try Etsy, you know, and this is the co-founder. And I, you know, very nicely thanked him, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, you know, I thought that was like knitted stuff and, you know, things made out of buttons. Yeah, I thought it was all crafts and stuff. So I kind of didn't consider it, and I looked at it a few months later, and, you know, realized there's actually quite a lot of activity on there in what I think anyone would consider fine art. And I put my stuff up on there, and, you know, I get dozens of orders per week from there. And they wrote a little story about me, a short story. They have this blog thing, whatever. Put that up. You know, a lot of people, you know, they're a $500 million company. A lot of people are paying attention and read that. And one picture of mine got picked up off of that blog and got into the Tumblr blog circuit. And it's creeping up on 100,000 notes, which is how many times it's been reblogged within Tumblr. And that doesn't speak at all to how many times it's been viewed. So, I mean, there is no way and that was just a few weeks ago. So in a matter of, say, 3 weeks, I've had hundreds of thousands of new people see a piece of mine and have access to get back to the link where it's for sale. I don't see how any gallery could offer that, or any other aspect other than, you know, all these amazing and wonderful new networking and exposure tools that the internet offers.
How are you creating these things? Do you have your own printer now?
I don't. I used to, when I had the product development firm, I had two very high-end printers. Finest resolution, they still are. That's available. One was $500,000, and the other one was $300,000. So this isn't something that, your average person just can have. It definitely requires a company business model and clientele and, jobs running on it every day to make the payments and all that kind of stuff. So with that, I had all this overhead and employees and Social Security taxes and insurance, all that stuff. And, I came to a crossroads and realized I wanted to get back to art. So I sold my partnership out. And the point is, I did this about face of my approach. And really 90%, 95% of everything I've done out of my home studio. And I use the networks, all these resources and networks that are available to me now to do my printing. And it's not just one, there's quite a few of them. So, I make the piece, and I know this doesn't apply to everybody, this is specific to how I do stuff, but I make the piece and I email the file and choose the material, the technology, the process, how I want it made, and in a couple of weeks I get a big box with 100 pieces in it sitting on my doorstep. And the 100 pieces isn't a minimum order; it's just how many things that I'm selling. So it's great because I have no overhead. I'm not spending money or making payments on crazy equipment like that. I'm letting the I guess the service bureaus do their job, and I get to be creative rather than maintaining and running machinery.
Who's going to assemble this piece that I'm showing right now, the new piece?
Not assembled. That's printed as one single piece. Those wings are 75 separate mechanical moving things. The wings open and close. And that is, it's all printed in one shot, fully assembled, fully working. There is no assembly. And then the pyramid, I call that the crooked Karen.
Yep.
That's about, I don't know, a dozen pieces or so. It's kind of like a puppet. You pull the heart on the hook at the bottom and the eye and the tongue, and then on the other side there's a little tail coming out of an ear that all wiggle around inside of there. There's a whole linkage mechanism on the inside. And again, all that's printed as one single piece ready to go.
Holy moly. So you're really smart about that. I would have thought it was assembled and somebody had to do it physically. So this isn't particularly more labor for you than the previous piece.
I'm sorry, say that again, Paul?
This isn't particularly more labor for you than the first piece.
No, even though it's, a lot more to it, it doesn't, I'm not out in the garage, scratching away or carving away at something or assembling pieces or anything. I mean, again, they come assembled, they're ready to go. I guess that, to be perfectly honest about it, there's actually three pieces there. There's a skull piece, the wings, and then the crooked Karen pyramid that hangs is the third piece. So if there's any assembly at all, it's just those three pieces get hung, kind of snapped together.
Do you have to ship these yourself, or how are you shipping them?
I do. At the last project I did myself. Everything came to me on pallets in a big shipping truck, when the project was over. And I'm doing the same thing on this. It's I want to be able to look at everything. I want to be able to touch everything, make sure it's the quality I want and working the way I want. And and there's other things I add to it. Signed cards and depending on the tier level, whatever, how this project's put together, and with other pieces that I sell, sometimes they're hand painted or come with other items. So I do all the shipping here, and that's getting to be a bit of an issue. And that's kind of why I'm doing this project. I'm looking to up my game, so to speak, and get some kind of office / studio space where I can spread out and I don't have to run a shipping and receiving distribution center out of my basement or garage. So I'm not complaining. So
I hear you. How many pieces did you sell total the first time? All the different variables.
I want to say it was right around 1,000. I had 955 backers, and some of them got multiple pieces, and then some of them bought a T-shirt or whatever. I didn't really count those, but actual printed pieces, when it was all done, it came in like right at 1,000 pieces. So 45 days I made 1,000 pieces.
That's impressive. Let's assume that the people who are listening in tonight are interested in doing a Kickstarter project for themselves. What are the steps? Let's start with the first things first and walk us through it, okay?
Yeah, it's kind of a broad, it's kind of a broad picture to paint. You know, everybody does so many different things in different mediums, but you know, first thing, you want to have a clear idea in mind of what you want to do, and not to be, you know, not to be confusing about this, but even if that thing is an experiment like mine was, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but you know, I really made it a clear experiment out of that. So you want to get an idea of what it is you want out of the project, what you're going to do, because you have to have the structure that you have to hang everything on. You know, if it's just like, you know, if your motivation is you just want to sell a lot of paintings or prints or something, that you know, you're not going to get a lot of excitement out of that. The project isn't going to have much excitement attached to it. It's really not speaking to much other than, you know, you trying to move some work. So, you know, it's good to come up with something that you know, that you want to do with it, that you want to use the art for, to give you an opportunity to do. So, and that could be anything. So, you know, trying to figure out what you want to do with it, then certainly
Can you give some specific examples of the kinds of projects you think make sense to take to Kickstarter?
Yeah, you know, they all work pretty good. I mean, there's a demographic there, as I said before, that, you know, really likes comic books, you know, that really likes design, you know, Apple stuff. And, you know, so when it comes to, you know, if you're a painter or a dancer or a musician or, you know, a sculptor or whatever, those projects don't tend to get the really huge numbers, you know, that, like, you know, the 10 million dollar projects do in the design field. And video games are very popular there too. So, but the point is, don't look at Kickstarter for what's popular on there. Look at it, what you can use it to do within your own network as a tool. So, you know, I think they'd all be fine, really. It's more about, you know, breaking some rules and trying to figure out, you know, how to really understand it and use it as a tool yourself, rather than trying to fit into the mold of, you know, what like a comic book or a video game place is doing. You know, they've got their own different, you know, group of interests. So, you know, you can look at how they put their stuff together, but I think Kickstarter really responds well to fresh and new ideas and ways of presenting them, and new, you know, new populations of people coming through there. So, you know, I do think there's a lot of room there for the fine arts market to do some really cool things, but I think, you know, those creators need to be very thoughtful about, you know, using it as a tool, and coming up with novel ways to do that, rather than just putting it up there and letting Kickstarter just run its course and hoping something happens. You need to really use it. So,
what are the important elements in your Kickstarter presentation? I mean, there's a video, there's a written description. Is there anything else?
Yeah, a video is very important. Again, Kickstarter provides a lot of you know, graphics and data and charts and whatever about what works and what doesn't. And projects with videos do just exponentially, like 75% better than projects without video. So you definitely want a video, and you don't want to go on there and goof around. Like, I mean, comedy is one thing and humor, but, you know, it just wastes somebody's time, and I've just seen those ridiculous videos on there that people put on there, and I can't believe they wasted their time doing it. I mean, you want to be serious enough that you're going to get to the point and realize that people are only going to spend 2-3 minutes, you know, 4 at the tops looking at this thing if they're interested, and they're going to know if they're interested in the first few seconds. So definitely a video that you thought out and makes your point early on and offer support through the rest of it. And then the written part of it is the more details. I mean, if somebody's interested in it, then they'll go to that and start looking, you know, for more details about things or discovery about what it is you're doing or what the rewards are. And then, you know, the third dynamic to that is the rewards, figuring out what your tiers are going to be and what they're going to cost, what they're going to cost you. You got to think about shipping and making them and all those things, and what you're going to offer them for. A lot of people have gotten into a lot of problems putting up rewards for a certain price and then realizing, that it's costing them more to make them and ship them than they charge for. So you need to be very thoughtful about what those margins are and just the logistics of putting that stuff out.
Let's open this up to questions in a moment. You guys can start raising your hands if you want or typing me questions, and I want to ask Josh one more question, and I'll see what questions you guys have. And that is, what things have you done differently this time than the first time?
Well, I've done a lot of things the same. Again, it worked so well, I didn't want to get too far off of, off tangent with it, trying something completely different. I was much more, and I encourage everyone to think about this as the press part of it, the exposure part of it. Again, Kickstarter isn't going to magically just, bring in all the funding for you. The idea is to put it up there and then use, the people or the networks that you have access to that apply to what you're doing. Whether it's paintings or sculptures or textiles or whatever, and try to bring those interested folks from those areas in, and either if you know them directly through like mailing lists or Facebook, or certainly getting press of any sort, and definitely anything specific to what you're doing. And I would say internet press is exponentially better than written press, especially when it comes to Kickstarter, because not too many people are going to be memorizing links off of some written piece in a local magazine or whatever. So blogs, all that stuff. So I spent a lot of time up front this time doing that, getting a lot of things set up and seeking out kind of announcement press when the project went live, which helped tremendously. The project opened up. Like within the first 4 days, it made $10,000, and that's a lot better than what I did the first time. So,
all right, you guys, if you have questions, raise your hands. Josh, the first time around, what percentage of the people who supported do you think were friends or known to you?
Known to me, marginal. 1-2%. I don't know. I certainly had a handful of friends and family back it, but I'd put it around maybe a dozen people, 10 people. I don't know.
Oh, wow. So to a large extent, new people.
Yeah, pretty much everything that happened there was new exposure. And not that my friends aren't supportive or anything, but and some of them were very excited and helped a lot both during the project and after. But yeah, what happened there was not due to to me just having a lot of friends or social network with a bunch of money that wanted to buy my stuff. It was all new discovery. So that's exciting to me. That's the point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Cool. All right, Kevin, go ahead.
Gosh, this is pretty amazing stuff. Thanks for talking to us today. I
Sure.
just had 2 questions. Could you talk a little bit more about the materials that you mix out of? And then secondly, do you think that with this techie demographic of Kickstarter, that the fact that your objects were interactive was significant in their popularity?
Can you restate the first part of the question?
Of the materials that you're making these out of.
Yeah. Okay. The materials, again, it's a 3D printing process. What I'm using mostly for these, and because of the types of pieces I make, it's this process called selective laser sintering. The material is actually a nylon and glass-based powder that's fused together with a laser. So there's some durability there. There's a little bit of flexibility, and again, the process allows me to make these very intricate shapes, sculptural shapes and geometries, without having to assemble them, without having a bunch of cleanup to do afterwards. When the piece is done, you just blow all the powder away, and the piece is liberated. So I can make. This is a fortunate thing in how I am using places like Kickstarter and the volume of pieces I'm moving, that I don't have to you spend lots and lots of personal time on every single piece. You know, it is much like selling prints of a painting or something. I'm selling duplicate prints, 3D prints though, of work, you know, original work that was done in virtual space. Now with the tech crowd and you know, that demographic of Kickstarter and my stuff being kind of interactive, you know, particularly this round, a lot of moving parts and kind of, you know, I do think that appeals, you know, maybe to that crowd, and the 3D printing tag on my stuff, you know, knowing that that's the medium appeals to that crowd. You know, my ability to provide this kind of stuff as rewards is enabled by, you know, the technology I'm using as a medium, you know, which would be much harder to do, you know, if I was, you know, sculpting every piece out of clay or carving it out of wood or something, unless I got, you know, again into some, you know, mechanized reproduction aspect of that. So what I'm doing does play into, I think, the success I've had on Kickstarter because it enables it, not fundamentally because my work is more valid because of it, but I can use the Kickstarter tool more effectively because of how I can put my stuff through, and kind of that buzz about the technology I'm using as well.
Cool. All right. Ken asked, and I thought this was an interesting question. Hold on. What is the most efficient way to network your message on the internet? Are you drawing from Facebook, email letters, blog, what, or all of them?
To network, I would say all of them, and I don't mean that to, you know, just give a pat answer, but they all matter, and they all matter for different things, and some are better than others. And when it comes down to it, I think a good approach, especially when you're starting out, is you want to start to get some kind of recognition that somebody somewhere has seen your stuff, and if they see it again, they remember. It's like, oh, I saw that, you know, now I've seen it again, and you know, you want people to see it again and again and again, and start to, you know, like it. Facebook is a good one for that, but beware with Facebook. There's a lot of activity on there, but it's very, very casual. You know, everybody thinks that, you know, clicking the thumbs up like button, you know, is, you know, some major endorsement of their taste or something. You know, they don't expect a lot of solid financial activity to come out of there, but it can happen. Out of the 11,000 followers I have, I would say around 100 of them that found me through Facebook actively collect my stuff, and that's a very small percentage, but 100 of people is a lot of people. So, you know, you definitely, it's strength in numbers is what the internet is. I do have a direct email list that's I keep trying to refine. You don't want to bother with people that don't care. You know, get them off your list and focus on the people that are interested in your stuff, and try to you know, just provide content and updates about your work that are relevant. And then everything else, Tumblr and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Instagram, all that stuff, man. Put your work everywhere, everywhere. Yeah.
You still working a straight job, Josh?
I have not worked a straight job, as you call it, you know, with suit and tie and all that crap, since '08. This is all I do, and I love it, but I actually, I you know, I'm working like twice as much, but you know.
Are you selling other pieces besides the things you've put on Kickstarter? I mean, are you making different images and selling them also?
Yeah. I've got all kinds of other stuff, and I've got it in different places. Yeah, I'm selling a lot of things elsewhere in different different pieces completely. Yes.
Okay, cool. Abra, your turn. Go ahead. Wait. Are we unmuting you at the same time? Don't touch anything. There you go. Go ahead.
Is this where? Can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, yes.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I actually typed this in, not very well knowing how to use a webinar. I know that I remember when Kickstarter first came on the scene, and it seemed that projects were funded pretty quickly and pretty easily. And since then, there has been a lot of media attention and a huge upswing in projects that appear, up to the point that I yesterday saw in a video on The Onion about how many projects, a parody of how many projects there are, yeah, and the sheer quantity of projects that are on Kickstarter. And yeah, I'm wondering, is the media attention on it and the fact that the user updating was so dramatic, putting the actual name Kickstarter in the public's vocabulary, does that, say, pose a problem to a new user who had never used it before, who had never had a project before? How would they get noticed among the many, many other users and the amount of popularity of the site?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a double-edged sword there. Like, I liken Kickstarter to, what Ed Sullivan was to the Beatles, or like MTV to Michael Jackson. When it's where people are going to find, the latest things that are happening, whether it's music or art or, design and tech things. So it's fantastic in that sense. And very exciting, and a lot of attention has been lauded on it. And when I did it last year, it was just ahead of that arc that you're seeing now. I mean, it was just exploding. But at that time, there wasn't a single $1 million project, as I had said earlier. Now, a year later, there's dozens of $1 million projects. $10 million is their new record, and it's crazy. There's tons and tons of projects on there. So the bad part is there's all this noise, and there's a lot of really low-quality projects too. There's a lot of noise on there, and how do you break through that and get noticed? And like I said, don't count on Kickstarter being like, I just put it up and you get found. You really need to work on bringing people to your project, finding them any other way you can. Anyway, I mean, again, break the rules, be creative, and figure out how to get people to notice what you're doing, and check out your, get press. That's a big thing. But with all the projects on there, there's a lot of people on there too. So when I did my project last year, I think I was found a little easier. It happened, and it was very, I was unique at the time in kind of what I was doing. But Kickstarter is that much more populated now in just activity of people being on there. So yeah, there's a lot more noise, but there's a lot more people. If your project starts doing well, it will start to show up in this algorithm of popular projects, and there's a lot of people there. So if you're lucky, I mean, some of this is luck as much as anything, but if it starts to happen on there, you're in front of that many more people than you were even last year. So there's a good side and a bad side to it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Josh. Carol asks, what is the computer program you're using to develop the 3D form?
I use quite a few. The two probably biggest ones in my arsenal are SolidWorks, which I use for most of the mechanical development and the engineering kind of end of it. And then I use ZBrush a lot for the organic sculptural, moving meshes and triangles and polygons around. And then from there, there's a host of things I goof with and experiment with, and then also just kind of technical things for prepping models for 3D printing. But SolidWorks and ZBrush are the two big ones.
Who do you have producing these things?
I was going to say one more thing. If you look at the project I have going on, there is a list of links to a lot of free software. If for whatever reason you want to try anything like this, so you can get into this, kind of free and get your feet wet without spending a lot of money. So I suggest checking that out for the free links. The places I'm using to do my stuff, I work with a lot of service bureaus, but there's one in particular, Shapeways, out of New York. They're originally from the Netherlands. And I've been working with them for a few years, and they're headquartered in New York City now, and they do probably 90% of my stuff. And then I work with a lot of independent bureaus around the world, actually, for all kinds of other things. There's a group called Voxeljet, which is they're actually a manufacturer of a printing technology that did all my I started out with this Tangle series, which was the first time that complex of a model had ever been cast in metal. And they did it, and their process enabled that, to be able to build a pattern that didn't have all this internal support structure that needed to be removed. They could build the pattern that would burn out in a loft wax process and then be cast under vacuum. So anyway, I worked with them and Shapeways. There's a place called Sculptio out of France I've worked with, a place called Pinocchio out of New Zealand that I've worked with. And they're popping up all over. There's more and more places. And then there's local vendors too that you can find in Chicago, or just all over the United States.
How large is the largest piece you can make with a 3D printer? I mean, a largest single element.
Well, it depends on which technology you're talking about, certainly. And if there's a brand new one, a company called Objet, which is the technology. I used to have 2 of their printers. Their new one is printing, I don't know the dimensions offhand, but basically you can print a bicycle. It's something that those dimensions, that size.
What do you think? What do you think of MakerBot?
I think MakerBot is great in the sense of the price point, and I think it's great because the resolution's getting better. I think it's great because it's easy to use. The material is easy to come by. It's fantastic. For what I do, I can't use it because of my shapes. There's all these things that the way it builds that has to have supports and so on. But I think I really have an affinity for these kind of consumer, prosumer level machines because, again, the machines I had, one being $500,000. I mean, it's just, you can't just play with it. You can't, it's very, it just keeps you from using it, So now the technology is moving ahead very, very quickly, and for these types of machines to be out there, for in the $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 range, theoretically, a person or 2, you can get together with somebody, partnership, whatever, put it on your credit card, and you got something to work with, But at the same time, these places like Shapeways, you don't even have to buy the machine. You just buy the part, and they're doing it for you. You can make something for $30, and free software. Send something over to Shapeways and get it printed and try it. Nobody's going hungry. Trying.
How much would you have to pay for the skulls you did in your first project that were the 5-inch variety?
How much did I have to pay for them?
Yeah.
The 5-inch variety, I had them at $250, and I want to say about $175, $200, somewhere in there was my cost. Now that's gone down a little bit in the last year, and that's another thing. The price is getting better on these things as volume of usage goes up and so on. But that is a problem, and part of the reason I did the original project is that when you start getting into scale, as you get bigger and you do more of things, they do get more and more expensive. And again, this is maybe why MakerBot's good, because if you need to concept things out, you can do that quickly without going broke by getting your own machine. But it can add up quickly. You can get a lot of paintings done. Stretching your own canvas and buying paints and so on. But every piece that you print on a printer, that's I guess I'm trying to make an analogy here, but it adds up, especially if you're experimenting, with it. So
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Michael, go ahead.
Hi, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, great. I had a question for Josh. I use ZBrush mainly for game design stuff that I kind of dabble in, but the idea of doing digital printing or 3D printing is kind of appealing to me. If I'm just using ZBrush, is that something is there a file I could just send over and have that printed from there, or do you need other software in between?
No, you don't. ZBrush, actually on their forum, the ZBrush Central, years ago, I posted a huge tutorial on how to use their software to, and I established a pipeline to get their files into a 3D printable format. Well, since then, and I had talked with them once in between them, they had contacted me with some questions about it. They have implemented in their releases now, they aren't even plugins, decimation software for bringing your file size down. 3D printing export plugin is in there for exporting actually in an FTL file. So you can do it all within ZBrush. The only problem with ZBrush is that there's no way to measure your pieces as far as minimum dimensional wall thicknesses and so on. So that's the only thing you might need an extra step to do your final checks. But yeah, you can do 95% of it right in ZBrush.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Laura.
Yes, thank you for talking with us, Josh. I sort of had a more specific question in regards to, you were saying, get a lot of press. Did you specifically send out press releases to internet blogs and other sort of websites, or were you just lucky enough where it sort of landed in your lap, or how would you suggest we go about doing that? Are there any
Yeah.
good places you would suggest?
Well, it was a little of both. I did a lot of groundwork, a lot of, working at trying to find press, that would be interested specifically in what I was doing. I did get just amazing press, the kind of stuff you just can't get by knocking on doors or even paying for from my last project, and things that I've had happen since then. Press like, Time Magazine and Wall Street Journal. I mean, you just, you don't happen into that kind of stuff. So some of that was in place for this project. I went back to press that had covered me before. First I went to them before I ever released anything and told them it's called an embargo, basically, that this is coming up on this date. You get a first look at it before anyone else, and I got some great press from that. And I suggest anybody who's gotten press anywhere before, you need to cultivate that. You need to keep them, I guess, apprised of what you're doing. Again, you don't want to bug anybody, but you need a good relationship with the press is an invaluable tool. So if you don't have that yet, and you're starting out, and you can say for a Kickstarter project or something, any project for that matter, you want people to know about it, and press is going to be what does it. And the blog circuit, arguably to me, again, over written press is way more effective and valuable, than a write-up in a local magazine. So anything on the internet, because of the links and the way it works and what's going on there, it works fantastic. So, and there are blogs at every level. So you don't have to, for it to be good press. I think it just needs to, the more you can get, the better. But start building on that, and any blogs are a great way to start. Facebook is a good way to kind of get the word out, and then also once you're in the kind of in that blog circuit, approaching other places, other places will start to see it. It's weird. It's a very organic, growing thing, and places pick up on other things. And press releases don't hurt. I would avoid trying to spend a lot of money on them or any, but just a pat press release. I haven't had tons of success, but they don't hurt. They get out there, and places just pick them up without hardly looking at them. They just run them. So, I mean, it's a good thing to have out there. And again, just in the sense that, you're part of the chatter, and you're starting to be, you've got places you can start to link to and use and to build kind of a press package for yourself. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Josh. Therese asks, take a 5-inch piece. How long does it take to print it?
5 inch, depending on the dimensions, if it's 5 inches high, the Z height, the height of the piece is really the governing factor in nearly every printing process. And, say a 5-inch cube, you're talking a few hours, likely, give or take, depending on the process. But it's not something that, that just grows, a lot of times when you see this technology, you're seeing in action, you're seeing a sped up version of it. So it can take quite a while. So when I had my printers, when we were doing bigger pieces, there was one case in particular, we ran the printer for 3 days straight, 72 hours, and we're in, changing out material with like tubes and bags, like just to keep it feeding into the machine. So, and then there's little pieces that you can print in, if it's really tiny and flat, it'll print with just a few minutes. So it's really all about scale and dimensions of the size that you're doing. But about a 5-inch piece, something, I guess that'd be.
We're starting to run short of. I'm sorry, Josh. We're starting to run short of time, so let's keep the questions and answers sort of shorter. Rita, go ahead.
Thanks. Your work is beautiful, Josh. Thank you for sharing it with us. I'm wondering how much the technology has influenced your subject matter, the actual the skull form and the things that you're using, or did that come first? Which came first, the skull forms, the subject matter, or the technology, or were they hand in hand?
Okay, I'll try and keep this concise. I started out with the form came first. I was doing these tangles. I couldn't make them any other way. So then the technology came along, and I kind of realized I could use that technology to finally make these really crazy things. And with that, I think a lot of folks weren't too sure about what it was I was doing, the medium, so on. And I'd done a lot of figure sculpture and representative work prior to that also. So the skull was kind of the combination of this, lyrical exploration kind of design thing over a three-dimensional object, and with my representational work, and I ended up putting them together. So the whole thing, one thing came first, but they all kind of helped each other. Nothing would have happened without the other one. But ultimately, it was the tangled drawings and explorations I did years and years ago that brought me, to this process and made me stick with it.
Cool. Lynn, your turn.
Hi, Josh. Thanks for talking with us. So you've been really successful on your own and through Kickstarter and kind of grassroots means of developing an audience and collectors and getting press. And so you mentioned that you have galleries approaching you now. Do you feel like they have a place? And what is that place? What are you hoping to get from them? Or maybe from something else? Like, what are next steps for you?
I still think galleries are they're very intriguing to me. I still want to, I think there's a lot of validity in them. It's not like they're just going to go away or need to. I think that they are better suited for a more developed, mid-career or just further along in their career type of artist as far as how productive they are for an artist. For an emerging artist, for somebody trying to break out there and get noticed and get feedback about their work and get things happening, I really think the internet and all these different tools are definitely more productive. They were for me anyway, and I would hope that everyone could try to seek out their own way to use that stuff, to no pun intended, but to kickstart what they're doing and get it going. But I do see the galleries as there's a point where the marketing and doing all this stuff yourself is a lot of work, and I think once you have a reputation and you can you can demand the prices that you need to reasonably make your work and make a living and all that stuff. The right galleries with the right people and the right understanding, I'm sure are invaluable. So I definitely hope to move into that and work with some good people that understand my work and have clientele that are interested in it as well. I just don't think that route was good for me to get started. I think it's something you need to work up to. At least that's how I see it working today, given the benefit of all the tools in the internet.
Sweet. Okay. Larry, I like your question. Where are you? Here you are. Larry, go ahead and ask your question.
I have a question. I'm making these mummies that are very intricate and involved, but I wanted to make pieces that you could make multiples of, and this whole idea of, and actually I teach at Columbia College here in Chicago, and we have a 3D printer, and I've not had any access to using it, but what you're saying is intriguing, and thank you very much, by the way, for sharing your story and your wonderful work.
Sure, thanks.
What I would like to do is, because I'd love to be able to get my pieces, and they're so time-consuming. I mean, I can't even imagine the concept of creating your pieces in the real world outside of, three-dimensional visualization and then this printer. But what I'd like to do is take my pieces and make multiples of them so that I can, in a sense, offer them at a much more reasonable price. Because when they're an individual piece, it just gets expensive. You were talking about it earlier, that the time that goes into making the work, unless you're making multiples, makes it cost prohibitive.
Yeah. Well, obviously the traditional means was always to, make molds and do castings.
Right.
And with my work, I couldn't make molds of it just because of what it is. So wasn't an option. So I work directly within the technology to make my stuff. But the new molds, I guess, of the 21st century is the scanning technology out there. So, and there are some, that can get expensive, but there's people with scanners that you can, and Larry, I encourage you to get a hold of me. You can contact me through my website, or I'll give you my email, whatever. I can hook you up pretty easy, but you can look into scanners and scanner, bureaus that are offering scanning services. And then once you have that file, you can scale it any size you want and make, reproductions of it. there is a product. There's a few of these, but if you have an iPhone or an iPad, there is a product by Autodesk called 123D Catch. And what you do is you go around whatever it is you want to take, get a scan of, and you take maybe 20 or 40 pictures of it, that direction. What it does, it creates a simple mesh for you that you can then work with to get 3D printed. Now, the mesh isn't exceptionally complex. It doesn't get all the details, but the point is it's free. It'll give you a chance to try something, again, without spending any money, really, if you happen to have an iPhone or an iPad. There's some other softwares out there where you can do that just with your digital camera and then, move them over and set everything up. But it's called photogrammetry, I think it's called.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome, Larry.
Good question, good answer. Josh, can you explain why it's called a printer? Somebody asked that.
Yeah, again, there's a few different technologies. There's, I think, technically right now 7 different technologies, and then within each one of those technologies, there's a myriad of different kind of applications of them and different, ways to discover information. But essentially, it's the three-dimensional piece is being made layer by layer by layer. So your print, one of the processes is a polyjet process. It's exactly the same as an inkjet printer. So instead of jetting ink onto the page, it's jetting a plastic resin with UV lights on either side of this printer head that cure the resin. It's a photopolymer. After it's jetted, it's cured, and it's laid one layer at a time down onto a build tray. So once that layer is done, then the tray drops a fraction of an inch, fraction of a millimeter actually, and the next layer is printed on top of it. And it keeps doing that. So it's really doing the same thing as your two-dimensional printer, but just stacking, all of these three-dimensional footprints on top of each other. Now, there's other ones that use a laser to either fuse powder together or cure resin or sinter metal. There's all kinds of things. But, the printing thing, I think maybe is just was easy, because it's like drawing it out, I think it kind of took a more accurate term that they're using now is additive manufacturing or layered object manufacturing, which are a little maybe more descriptive, but that 3D printing term, I don't know, it's stuck. The first technology was called stereolithography, and that term lithography, and its connection to printing, it just, in the early days it took, and it's stuck ever since.
Cool. Ken, you get the last question.
Thank you, Josh. You've become suddenly successful as an artist. You've emerged in this field through the internet. You're an artist straddling science. You know the science behind it, design engineering. You're engaged in this whole commerce. I feel like, and you're saying this, that something's changing. The artist is having a new role in our society, perhaps. What do you see emerging for yourself, for other artists, in the coming world that we're entering now?
Yeah, wow, that's a big one. I do see things changing like crazy, and certainly, when you're in the middle of it, you maybe even think it's bigger than it is, but with sculpture, just the way things are done and what can be done, it's a new tool. Once upon a time, sticks and stones and chisels and and then power tools, all these things have been used, and now these printers and digital softwares are out there, and it's literally not. It's changed things so much you can make things that were absolutely unmakeable before. I mean, and that's how I got into this. I could never make what my art was three-dimensionally, and as a sculptor, that's a rough place to be, So, that's hugely liberating. But that's already happened for the two-dimensional artists. When you look at like the Photoshop and the Illustrator, and photography with digital cameras, and all sorts of things. I mean, more traditional artists, the painters, and stone carvers and stuff. There's some differences there. I don't know what to. We could have separate conversations about all that, but I do think all this is very empowering to the artist, and allows us to be maybe more creative in certain ways, and handle more of our career and make a career out of it rather than, you know, doing it simply for the love. You know, there are ways that we individually and tools available to us individually that we can use, you know, to do serious work with this stuff. And I think that's a huge game changer. And my project is about this revolution, more specifically kind of the printing and sculptural end of it. But, you know, it's applicable in a lot of different ways, you know, in a lot of different perspectives.
Awesome. Lastly, how tough are these things? How durable are these projects you have? I mean, the pieces themselves.
Just smack these. They're quite durable. Again, this is like one of the pieces. I don't know if you see it here. I'm squeezing it. So yeah. You know, it's not like they're very delicate looking, and you know, but the materials.
You could drop that from 6 feet and nothing would happen to it, odds are.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there's, you know, different depending on which technology or material you use. You know, there's different. I mean, you can get stuff printed in glass and ceramics too, exactly the same as, you know, cast glass and ceramic, which aren't going to take a fall like that. But this material in particular, basically a nylon glass powder all fused together. It holds exceptionally delicate shapes, but offers, you know, a lot of durability because of its innate flexibility. So
if you're going to order, let's say 100. Let's say you're going to order 100 pieces. How long does it take the company to deliver?
I just got 100. I got 300 pieces in a couple weeks ago, and I place the order, and usually in about 10 business days, I have them. Now that varies a little bit. Yeah, it's crazy, right? It varies a little bit, you know, depending on, you know, all kinds of factors. Basically, the biggest thing that knocked my delivery schedule out was Hurricane Sandy. You know, just shut everything down. But I mean, if everything's running, it goes fine and it's quick, and you know, it's amazingly empowering. You know, for me as a sculptor to be able to, you know.
Do you deal with these as additions? Do you sign and number the pieces?
I've really explored that because I want to keep things. You know, there's certain pieces I do that are more special. You know, for whatever reasons, but. You know, I can't really subscribe to this artificial scarcity. You know, I can, once I have it done, I can make a million of them with the same quality, you know, no diminished quality whatsoever, like you would get out of a mold. You know, the more pulls you take out of a mold, the worse it's going to get. So that's not really the case. So for me to limit it is philosophically, I don't know the point other than trying to, you know, drive up prices. And I'd rather have everybody know my work and collect it than and make my way through my career that way, rather than just having a few very, you know, wealthy people have my stuff in their homes and nobody see it. So I have really sided with the end of like open editions, I call them, where, you know, it's just I make as many, but I do hand painted ones where I'll sign them, and you know, it's basically one of a kind because, you know, I painted it, and you know, I do a lot of intricate painting on them. And I'm trying to explore other things. You know, I want to grow moss and algae on some of these. You know, just goofing with stuff. And I would consider those more one of a kind, you know, explorations. But you know, fundamentally, the pieces I make, you know, other than the bronzes, I do limited editions on those. But everything else, open edition. That's how I'm approaching it, and that's the technology allowing that.
Josh, I think this has been fabulous. I appreciate your generosity and your knowledge and your experience in that, you know, exploring a new paradigm. I think this has been really cool. Let me unmute everybody so we can all thank you together. Everybody's now unmuted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for you know, for sitting in on this and listening to me chat about it.
Thank you.